Some moments don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, between the clatter of silverware and the low hum of a restaurant that smells of slow-roasted garlic and aged wine. They arrive wearing a suit that costs more than your rent, sitting at a corner table like he owns the air around him. And they look at you, just once, the way no one ever has. Like you are the only fixed point in a spinning world. Like they have been waiting. Like they already know your name. This is a story about power. About obsession. About a woman who tried to stay safe. And a man who made safety feel like a cage. If you've ever been afraid of being loved too much or not enough, stay with me. Please like, share, and subscribe. Ariana Greco had been working the floor at Santini's Ristorante for 11 months before she understood what the restaurant actually was. On the surface, it was impeccable: white linen tablecloths, a cellar that made grown men weep, and a maitre d' named Paolo who moved like smoke. The clientele were quiet in the way that expensive things were quiet. Controlled. Deliberate. Ariana told herself she preferred it that way. She needed the money, needed the hours, needed the distraction that came with carrying 8 plates at once and reciting wine pairings in her sleep. She did not need complications. She did not need the man who walked in at 8:47 on a Thursday night like the room rearranged itself around him. Raffaele Santini was 41, Italian to his marrow, with dark hair threaded at the temples and eyes so still they felt like standing water. Peaceful on the surface, fathomless beneath. He wore his power the way other men wore cologne. Casually. Completely. He sat at table 7. Table 7 was not on Ariana's section. She found out it was hers now when Paolo appeared at her elbow and murmured, "Mr. Santini has requested you personally." She had never spoken to the man in her life. She approached the table with a professional smile and a notepad she didn't need. He was reading, a folded document, not the menu, and he didn't look up immediately. That was the first thing she noticed. He didn't perform awareness of her the way men usually did. He simply finished his sentence, folded the paper, and looked up. "Ariana," he said. Her name, in his mouth, was not a question. "Good evening, Mr. Santini. Can I start you with something to drink? Water. And I'd like your recommendation on the menu." She had given 100 recommendations. She gave them the way she'd been trained, confident, practiced, smooth. But something in his attention made her careful. He wasn't watching her the way men watched waitresses. He was watching her the way you watched something rare. "The branzino," she said. "The kitchen does it in a brown butter with capers and a preserved lemon. It's exceptional tonight." "Then I'll trust you." He said it simply, like it meant something. She wrote nothing down. She didn't need to. But her hand moved anyway, the pen pressing a thin red mark along the margin of her notepad as she drew a small line. A habit, a way of marking the moment so she wouldn't lose the order in the weeds of a busy night. She didn't know he saw it. She didn't know he saw everything. Later, when the kitchen was loud and the pass was stacking up, Marco from the bar appeared at her side and dropped his voice low. "You know who that is, right?" She was plating garnish. She didn't look up. "A regular. Ariana." Marco's tone shifted. Something careful in it. "He's the owner." She looked up then. Marco was already moving away, and he said it over his shoulder, almost as an afterthought. Almost, but not quite. "He's armed." "Don't react." She reacted. Internally. Precisely. She carried the branzino to table 7 with both hands perfectly steady and set it down with a clean, practiced grace she had cultivated like armor. "Enjoy your meal, Mr. Santini." "Raphael," he said. She pretended not to hear. He let her. He came back the following Thursday. And the one after that. Always at 8:47. Always table 7. Always her section, which was now, without anyone making an announcement, always his section. He ordered whatever she recommended. He tipped with the quiet generosity of someone who understood that dignity was more valuable than spectacle. He never lingered past what was appropriate. He never said anything that crossed a line. But he looked at her. God, he looked at her. Not with hunger, or not only with hunger. With something more patient than that. Like he had already decided, and was simply giving her time to catch up. She told herself it was professional. She told herself the warmth she felt when she approached his table was just good performance. The satisfaction of a regular, the comfort of a familiar face. She told herself a lot of things in those weeks. It was a Monday, his restaurants were closed Mondays, when she found the car. It was raining properly, the kind of Roman rain that came sideways and meant it. She was walking to the metro with her jacket pulled tight, her umbrella turned inside out by the wind. already calculating how wet she was willing to get before she gave up entirely. A black car pulled to the curb. The window came down. Raphael Santini looked at her from the passenger seat with an expression that said he had been driving this route for reasons he wasn't ready to admit. "Get in," he said. "I'm fine. You're soaked. I'm almost at the metro. It's flooded. The Termini line is suspended." She stood in the rain for 3 more seconds, which was exactly how long it took for her pride to negotiate a temporary ceasefire with her common sense. She got in. The car was warm. It smelled of leather and something quiet, cedar, maybe, or sandalwood. The driver, a man with the build of a small monument, didn't speak or turn around. Raphael didn't speak either for a moment. He handed her a folded cloth from the door pocket. Not a tissue, an actual handkerchief monogrammed, and looked out the window. "Where do you live?" he asked. She told him. The car moved. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "No," he agreed. She looked at him. He was watching the rain on the window. There was something in his profile, a stillness that wasn't coldness, a control that wasn't absence. He was a man who had learned not to want things out loud. She understood that, more than she wanted to. "How did you know I was on that street?" she asked. A beat of silence. Not evasion, consideration. "I didn't," he said. She believed him. She didn't know why that was almost more unsettling. He walked her to her door in the rain, waving the driver off with a gesture, and stood far enough away to be respectful, close enough that she was aware of every inch between them. "Good night, Ariana." "Good night, Mr. Santini." He almost smiled. She felt it more than she saw it, a small shift in the air. She went inside. She stood with her back against the door in the dark of her hallway and listened to the sound of her own heartbeat until it slowed. This was a problem, she told herself. This was a very elegant, very dangerous problem. 3 weeks later, there was a man at the bar. He was handsome in a loose, easy way, the kind of man who smiled first and thought second. His name was Luca, and he was a friend of Marco's, and he came in on a Saturday with the specific energy of someone who had been told a beautiful woman worked the floor. He ordered slowly. On purpose. He made her laugh, once accidentally, over a badly translated menu description for a pasta that sounded romantic in Italian and absurd in English. She saw the shift the moment it happened. She didn't look at table 7. She refused to look at table 7. But she felt it. The temperature of the room changed in the way a thunderstorm changed it. Not loudly, not visibly, but in the pressure. In the quality of the silence from the corner. When she finally glanced over, just once reflexively, Raphael Santini was holding his wine glass and watching Luca with the specific, contained focus of a man who had learned how to be furious without moving a muscle. He didn't do anything. He didn't need to. When Luca asked for her number at the end of the night, Paolo appeared from nowhere with a bill that had already been paid, Luca's, and said, with a smile like a closed door, "Mr. Vieri, your car is ready." Luca had not ordered a car. He left anyway. Ariana stood at the service station, her heart in her throat, and understood for the first time exactly what kind of man Raphael Santini was. She understood it, and she was afraid. Not of him. Of herself. Because she wasn't angry. End of batch 1, continued in batch 2 below. Here is batch 2, continuing seamlessly. She told herself she would quit. She rehearsed the conversation with Paolo 3 times in her apartment mirror. Professional, grateful, final. She had done harder things. She had left her hometown at 19 with 2 suitcases and a cousin's address. She had survived a relationship that had taught her what it felt like to be slowly erased. She knew how to walk away from things that threatened to consume her. She went to work on Thursday. He was there at 8:47. She took his order. He asked for her recommendation. She told him the lamb. He said he'd trust her. The same words, the same weight, and she hated how her chest opened around them like a window in spring. After service, when the floor was empty and the kitchen was winding down, she found a single envelope at the service station with her name on it. Inside, a key card. And a handwritten note, not typed, not formal, handwritten in a strong, unhurried script. The rooftop garden at the Palazzo Chini. Sunday morning, 9 a.m. No obligation. Only if you want to see something beautiful. No signature. He didn't need one. She went. She told herself it was curiosity. She told herself she was going to tell him, clearly, professionally, once and for all, that whatever this was needed to stop. The rooftop was extraordinary. Wisteria over iron archways. Terracotta pots spilling with rosemary and lemon trees. The whole city below them, gold in the early light. He was already there, no jacket, sleeves rolled to the forearm, crouching beside a broken pot that he was improbably replanting. He looked up when she arrived. He didn't stand immediately. He finished pressing the soil around the base of the plant, patient, deliberate, and then he rose. "You came," he said. "I came to tell you this has to stop." He looked at her without surprise, without defense. He simply looked at her, and she felt the full weight of his attention like sunlight, warm and impossible to ignore. "All right," he said. She blinked. "All right, tell me what you need it to look like. I'll do it." She had prepared for resistance, for charm, for the particular manipulation of powerful men who believed that wanting something entitled them to it. She had not prepared for this, for the quiet, complete surrender of a man who apparently understood that her comfort mattered more than his want. Her voice, when it came, was smaller than she intended. "Why?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. The city moved below them. Somewhere, a church bell counted the hour. "Because you're the first person in 11 years who has made me feel something I didn't plan," he said. "And I would rather lose that than make you afraid of it." She didn't leave. They sat together for 2 hours in the garden, talking about nothing that mattered and everything that did. Her grandmother's kitchen in Napoli, his first year in Rome at 19 with his father's debts and his own fury, the way grief changed the texture of a city, the specific loneliness of being surrounded by people who needed you. He refilled her coffee once without asking. He did not touch her. She noticed both. It was his silence that undid her eventually. Not his power. Not his beauty. His silence. The way he held space around her without filling it. The way he listened like it was the only thing happening in the world. She kissed him first. On the rooftop, in the late morning light, with the lemon trees and the wisteria and the whole impossible city behind them. She closed the distance herself. Just slightly, just her hand at his jaw, just her mouth finding his. And he went very still the way a man went still who had been waiting a long time for something and couldn't believe it was real. His arms came around her slowly. Everything in him was careful. Everything in him was certain. The world fell quiet. What happened next belongs only to them. The privacy of two people choosing each other in the particular silence that lives between one breath and the next. Only this. When the afternoon light moved across the terrace floor and she finally pressed her forehead to his shoulder, she felt, for the first time in longer than she could name, completely safe. The danger arrived the way it always did, while she was looking somewhere else. His name was Carmine Esposito, and he was old money and older grudges. And he had been watching Raphael's ascent for a decade with the specific resentment of a man who believed that power was inheritance, not earned. When word reached him, as word in this world always did, that Raphael Santini had developed a softness, had a woman, had something to lose. He sent a message. Not to Raphael. To Ariana. She found it in her apartment. A photograph of her walking to work, taken without her knowledge, paper-clipped to a single typed line. Tell him to step back from the Castellano arrangement, or the next photo will be taken closer. She sat with it for 3 hours. She thought about leaving, not just his world, but the city. Starting again somewhere without wisteria or rooftops or men who looked at her like she was the fixed point. Then she thought about his face when he said, "I would rather lose that than make you afraid of it." She called him. What followed happened fast. The way Raphael Santini did most things that mattered. He was at her apartment in 20 minutes. He read the note without expression. He made 2 calls in Italian too low and fast for her to follow. He sat across from her at her small kitchen table and looked at her and said the words that changed everything. "I'm going to handle this. And then I'm going to step back from everything that put you in this position. Raphael, the Castellano arrangement, the territory, the leverage I've spent 8 years building. I will give it up." His voice was quiet and absolutely without performance. "None of it is worth a photograph of you taken without your consent. None of it is worth a single hour of your fear." She stared at him. "You built all of that," she said. "Your whole." "I know what I built," he said. "I know exactly what I'm choosing over it." Carmine Esposito miscalculated, as men who mistake sentiment for weakness always do. He didn't understand that Raphael's willingness to sacrifice power was not weakness. It was the most dangerous thing about him. The investigation that followed, quiet, thorough, lethal in its precision, dismantled Carmine's network in 6 weeks. He never touched Ariana. He never got close. Raphael made sure of it in ways that were entirely legal, entirely devastating, and entirely invisible to her. She found out months later. She wasn't angry. She understood by then the language he spoke. Not words, but action. Not promises, but presence. It was a Wednesday morning, ordinary in all the ways that mattered, when he asked her. Not on a rooftop. Not in a restaurant. In her kitchen, while she was making coffee, still in yesterday's clothes, her hair unmade. Nothing about the moment cinematic at all. He was sitting at the table. The same table where he'd read the threatening note, where he'd made the calls that unraveled an empire. And he had a small box in his hands, and he was looking at her with an expression that was, for the first time, completely unguarded. No stillness. No control. Just Raphael. Afraid. Hopeful. Entirely present. I'm not asking you to enter my world, he said. I've already been leaving it. I'm asking you to let me build something new in yours. She set down the coffee. She crossed the kitchen. She took the box from his hands, opened it, looked at the ring, simple, significant, perfect, and then looked at him. You gave up an empire, she said. I got a better one, he said. She said yes in the kitchen, in the ordinary light of a Wednesday morning. And that was exactly right, because the love that lasts is not the love that begins on rooftops. It's the love that survives Tuesday, that chooses you in the unglamorous in-between. She married him in September, in a garden outside Rome with 40 people, and her grandmother weeping in the front row. 6 months later, she found him in their kitchen again, standing over a pot of something that smelled of garlic and slow thyme. And she told him. She didn't know how he would react. She didn't know how she would, either. He set down the spoon. He turned around, and the expression on his face, the face of a man who had built and dismantled empires, who had looked at war and never blinked, crumpled into something purely, helplessly human. He crossed to her. He took her face in both his hands. He pressed his forehead to hers in the exact way she had learned meant. I am overwhelmed and I am grateful, and I do not have words for this. Tell me again, he whispered. So she did. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent as cities are, its traffic and its bells and its ancient, patient stone. And in a kitchen that smelled of garlic and beginnings, a woman who had been afraid of being loved too much held the face of a man who had given up everything to learn how to love her just enough. Which is to say, completely. Which is to say, always. Please like, share, and subscribe.